do I just allow this fear to be the thing that stops me from doing this thing, or do I see what's on the other side of the fear? And they're two very different lives. I'm sure you've heard the quote, everything you want is on the other side of fear.
Personal growth and personal development and self-improvement and self-belief and facing uncomfortable truths is almost like a dirty little secret that you don't want anyone to know, because it's such a status build to just show up with results.
Next Level Nation, welcome back to another episode of Next Level University, where we help you level up your life, your love, your health, and your wealth. We hope you enjoyed yesterday's episode number 1695, 2 reasons why your financial situation isn't changing. Any situation really, but definitely financial. Today, for episode number 1696, fear of success versus fear of failure. I was having a discussion with someone on their podcast recently, Alan, and it was a business podcast, and they said, a lot of people talk about the fear of failure. I want to talk about the fear of success with you today.
Nice.
Because that's something that I think I had in my profile. Shout out to Laura for booking me on the show, and I'm doing all the questions and the answers, all that happy jazz. She is crushing it. So we start the interview, and there's a little background. What do you do? What was your journey like? All that happy jazz. And then the host said, what are the 3 steps for someone to get over the fear of success? And if you could give examples, that would be great. And I was thinking mostly of you, because when you and I started working together, I was desperately afraid of fear of failure. And then eventually, over time, we uncovered that you had a fear of success. Mm-hmm. And I said, 1, it's identifying where it came from. Why do you have a fear of success? Where did it come from? Was it people bullying you in the past? Every time you grew, you evolved, you made progress, people tried to pull you down? Were you villainized for your growth? Did you do some sketchy stuff that you don't want people to find out eventually? Where does it come from? Second thing is, really sit with the people around you and whether or not they're making it better or worse. Because if it was the people who are bullying you and all that, and they're still in your life, it's not going to get any better. And then the third thing was, you need to find a new community where being awesome and being successful is a win. And we went through that whole discussion. And I don't know, maybe you probably have a better answer than I. What percentage of people do you think are afraid of success versus failure?
Very low. I'd say probably 3%. And I'm not just taking that number out of nowhere. I don't know if this is still a statistic, so don't quote me on this. So I'm going to be very, very humble in my delivery of this statistic. Somewhere along the lines, I think I researched this way back in the 2012 days when I first started my first company. It was called Campus Libre. Kevin, I was at a Halloween party. He said, I don't know what Campus Libre is, but I like it.
But I like it.
You were I
was a genie.
Yeah.
And you were
for Halloween.
You were Nick Carter?
I was Nick Carter, I think.
We were very drunk. Did you drink that night?
Oh, yeah.
I think that was the only time I've ever drank with you. I didn't realize that until this moment.
Yeah, that was a great night.
I had a great time.
Yeah, same. Yeah. This is way back in 2012. That's 12 years ago, man.
That's wild.
You were jacked in that.
That's why
thing.
I appreciate that. That's why I wore it. Again, going back to the significance episode, we were talking about the cleavage. Trust me, I am more guilty of that than most
sleeveless
people.
teacup, or no, not teacup.
Genie.
You were a genie.
I got the costume because I didn't have to wear a shirt. That's why I got the costume for sure.
Well, it worked for sure.
I appreciate it.
So why was I telling that story?
You were researching the stats.
The statistics. Yeah. So again, don't quote me on this. A very small percentage of the population ever starts a business. And of that very small part of the population, a very, very small part of that percentage actually still exists in any 10-year period. So it's, if 1,000 people are in a room, random sample, global, I don't know, 30 of them are entrepreneurs who start a real business. And then of those 30, maybe 3 are still alive in 10 years. And that doesn't even mean they're successful. That means they're alive.
The business.
And I mean alive as in not bankrupt, by the way. I don't mean, it's not like entrepreneurs necessarily die younger or anything like that. Although I've never read any of those stats. Entrepreneurship is hard, so maybe there's some adverse effects. But the fear of success, I think, comes from being different. And I think entrepreneurs inherently are different.
You think it has to do with belief?
Yeah.
The host was very confident. He actually said, "Are you calling me arrogant?" at one point, joking. That's the level of confidence he had. He's definitely been called arrogant many times, I'm sure. And I said, and we had a good laugh about it. It's like, no, you know I'm not. And he said, "I am definitely more on the fear of success." And I said, "I would have bet that because you believe in yourself a lot."
Yeah.
I don't know. It's almost like if you have a ton of doubt in yourself, again, this was my experience, I had a fear of failure. I was more afraid of being left behind. I was more afraid that if I held on to certain friends that weren't necessarily good for me, I wouldn't be successful. I wasn't worried about being alone. I was worried about being unsuccessful. That was always my fear.
So anyone who has a lot of self-belief, not fake self-belief, not inflated self-belief, genuine self-belief. And I've actually started breaking self-belief down into two categories. One is competence self-belief, which is you believe you can go achieve this external thing. The other one is belief in who you are, which is different. But right now I'm just talking about competence self-belief. And I'll tell a story to illustrate this. Excuse me. So ever since I was 10 years old, I drove past with my mom. We were in her black BMW at the time. This was when my stepdad was still around. We drove past WPI and the bottom of the hill. For those of you who know WPI, I know you hear about it all the time on this podcast, but I was actually on a podcast recently with an HR director, and she's like, "Oh, Massachusetts? Cool. I know Massachusetts well. I went to WPI." And I was like, "What year?" She's like, "You don't want to know what year. It was a long, long time ago." I'm like, "What year?" So anyways, it was a great conversation. I'm on her show this week actually. Shout out to Guinevere. But anyways, so I was 10 years old, and I went past the bottom of the hill at WPI with the big WPI sign. And my mom said, "You're good at math. Your Uncle Merle is the track and field coach there. Engineers make a lot of money. You should be an engineer. Engineers are good at math." And that was the dream planted in my head of I'm going to be an engineer one day. It was always politician or lawyer, politician, president, engineer, MBA, CEO of a tech company. And so my buddy Kiki, growing up, was my best friend, and he wanted to go as well. We were both good at math. He's brilliant. And we were going to go to WPI. He didn't get in. And so one of the reasons why people who have really, 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 really high self-belief get bullied or picked on or called arrogant is because to other people, they do seem very arrogant. You've actually started to flip the script on this, where you'll be in the gym talking to someone and you unintentionally marginalize their goals by talking about yours.
Yes, 100%.
And you had that moment of, "Oh, he's going to think I'm arrogant."
Yep.
When in reality, you're just being honest about what you're intending. So I was so naive. Like, I intended to go to WPI and be a CEO. And that's genuinely what I intended to do. I wasn't being arrogant. I just calculated it. And that was my truth. So my best friend at the time didn't get in, and that caused a lot of sadness. And so I think that's what happens. And I think the reason I was afraid of success was actually abandonment. It's been really hard for me to lose all my friends, even if it was by choice. That's been the hardest part of this journey for me. So if you are afraid of success, underneath that is most likely some level of fear of abandonment or fear of being alone or fear of outgrowing people. If you're afraid of failure, most likely you're deep down just afraid of you're not good enough or you're not smart enough or you're not capable enough. And that's okay. Everyone has one or the other. There's a downside to every upside.
Of course.
The upside to having low self-belief is you do fit in more naturally. The downside to having high self-belief is you probably feel very alone. And Kevin and I, because we have each other, figured that out. Because I had no idea what was going on. I didn't understand why everyone thought I was arrogant. It didn't make any sense to me.
Yeah.
And sometimes I really was arrogant, which makes it even more confusing because sometimes I actually am overconfident, honestly, particularly in the short term. And so it's been really hard to figure all this out. But now that I know my fear is success, I can overcome it now. I can face it in advance. I can mourn the loss in advance. And I think we did an episode recently about that. But who knows? You know, maybe I'll be more fulfilled as a success, even if it comes with sadness. And that's really the part that I've had to really work on accepting. NLU listener, what is happening? I just wanted to jump in here and let you know, if you want to get to the next level faster, we have a free virtual monthly meetup at the first Thursday of every month, 6 p.m. Eastern Time. You can connect with like-minded people and become a bigger part of this amazing global community. The link to register will be in the show notes.
I think I told you this one time behind the scenes, because I was like, I had a breakthrough about this fear of success thing. And this was, I don't know, maybe a year ago. I went on somebody's podcast, and this person is just an exceptional human being. Just very well put together, very intelligent, very clearly successful, very confident. Confident to the point where she doesn't understand how much more confident that she is than most other people. And we did a podcast breakthrough session after, and her and I had a really good relationship. We connected really well. And she was talking to me at one point about how her neighbor, I think her neighbor had been her neighbor for many years and was always terrible to her. And I said, is that a pattern? And she said, what do you mean? I said, do you get villainized a lot by people? And she said, yeah, that tends to happen. And I dug. Again, we're supposed to be talking about podcasting. It depends on the person. And we got to the point where we realized she was afraid of success. And that was one of the reasons why, because every time she leaned into being successful, she got villainized more and more and more and more and more.
Mm-hmm.
And it would have been easier for her to play small. Because when you play small, you don't get to the podium. And you don't have people looking at you and villainizing you. You don't get any of that. You don't necessarily get any love either, but you don't get any hate.
Yeah.
You know?
You do get some love, but you don't get as
much.
The magnitude of it.
Yeah.
But it is easier to fit in sometimes than it is to stand out. And the irony, the paradox of this is the people who easily fit in want to stand out. The people who stand out want to fit in. I used to be playful, and I joke. Kevin and I both give a speech to 1,000 people. I'm worried that everyone's going to hate me, but I know I'll add more value than any other speaker. Kevin is wondering whether or not he's going to add value, but he knows he can get everyone laughing and liking him. And the truth of the matter is I said this in book club on Saturday. I said, I don't really care if you guys have fun at book club. I only care about one thing. I care that your life gets better from what you learn here today. I don't care. If you are temporarily feeling uncomfortable, good. I as long as it's for a better future, it's worth it to me. And I don't think I say that, and I try not to get triggered saying it, but the truth of the matter is, your future's not going to get bigger and brighter if you're not facing uncomfortable truths.
Yeah. And
book club just happens to be one of those things. And I said this in book club. I said, all of you don't tell your friends about this. None of you tell your friends you're at book club right now. That it's not cool to be at a book club. Like, that's not cool. Well, half of these people, hide the fact that that's what they're doing. Not all of you, by the way. If you're listening, not all of you. But the truth is, it's not cool. It's way cooler to go to the movies than it is to go to a book club. So it just gets, it's kind of like personal growth and personal development and self-improvement and self-belief and facing uncomfortable truths is almost like a dirty little secret that you don't want anyone to know, because it's such a status build to just show up with results. People always say, just show up with the results, don't talk about it. Well, that's the loneliest thing in the entire world.
Yeah.
I would much rather, and by the way, when you talk about things that are taboo, don't talk about money. Well, I wonder why we're all struggling with money. We're never able to talk about it. So it's important to, whichever end you're on, face the fear. Face the fear, and you'll be better off. And that's what Kevin and I had to do.
Yeah, and we still do it. We're still doing it more and more and more and more and more. Just leaning into it more and more and more and more. I was talking to somebody in my email the other day, and I went on this person's podcast a couple of years ago, and this person is a doctor for NASA. It's a space doctor. I didn't even know it was a real thing. I thought that was like in movies. I didn't know that was a real thing. I mean, it makes sense. But I had a moment before where I said, there's no way I'm supposed to be on this podcast. Some lines must have got crossed up. I don't belong here. There's no way. I'm not going to add value on this podcast. This person works for NASA as a doctor. I have a high school education, son. This is not going to go well. It went really well.
How did it go?
It went really well. Yeah, it went better than I expected. But it really is always about, and we're going to do a deeper dive for tomorrow's episode on this, but it's always about that. Do I just allow this fear to be the thing that stops me from doing this thing, or do I see what's on the other side of the fear? And they're two very different lives. I'm sure you've heard the quote, everything you want is on the other side of fear. Again, sexy, looks really good on a bumper sticker. There's layers and levels to that. We'll talk more about that tomorrow, though, because we have a couple of really good stories about that for tomorrow's episode.
Last thing, I used to think of it like this. You had this slide that you used to pull up where there was a person stuck in the center of a fence and then fear was all around it.
Yeah.
So I used to think of fear like that. We all get trapped in this little box of you're afraid of success, but you're also afraid of failure. So you don't want to go past this line of failure, but you also don't want to be so successful that you get ostracized by your peers. And so we all stay in this little box that our peers kind of put us in unconsciously. I don't think of fear like that anymore. I used to think of fear, you face the fear and you grow through it, you go through it. I don't think of it like that anymore. I think of it more, you go inside and you face the fear inside of you, and then you become more on the outside. That's a new way to start thinking about fear, because for me, I always thought of fear as, oh, well, I'm afraid to apply to that school. So I applied to an Ivy League school, Tufts, and I got in. Most people are afraid to apply because they might get rejected. Mm. For me, that never landed. I don't care if I get rejected. Whatever. Like, I'll just apply to another school. It's all fine. Again, I know that sounds weird, maybe to someone who is afraid of rejection. But for me, that never worked because that wasn't my fear. Yeah. I'm not afraid to not get into WPI. I'll just try again next year. It's not that for me. What I am afraid of is losing all my friends and being the only one who gets in and leaving everyone behind and not being able to hang out with them anymore because I'm so different. So for me, instead of going through the fear, I think that analogy is for someone who is afraid to be rejected or afraid to do the thing. That's competence fear issue. That's not what I had. So what I had instead was a lack of social courage and a lack of facing the internal fears. So for me, I think of the fears inside of me instead of outside of me, because the fears outside of me, you know this, we get rejected by some mentor. Like, how much does that bug me?
Oh, not at all.
It doesn't affect me whatsoever. But we lose a team member, and right? So for me, the fear is inside of me. And it's inside you too, but if it is external fear like Kev, think of the fear outside of you, and you got to get over that fence. And you can. And you got to try, and it's going to hurt, but you can do it. Whereas if you're on the fear of success end, my end, you got to face the fear in your own heart. It's not out there. I'm not afraid to climb a mountain. I'm not afraid to apply to a school. Like, I'm not afraid to do the interview. That's not it. For me, the fear is my inner circle. It's the abandonment stuff from losing 3 families by the time I'm 14 and that kind of stuff. So most of my pain came from social, came from peers, came from bullies or villainized or losing people. It's the sadness. My pain didn't usually come from rejection and failure in that way. So there's achievement failure, and then there's social failure. And if you're good at the achievement part, you're probably not as good at the social part. And if you're good at the social part, you might not be as good at the achievement part, because statistically speaking, please don't villainize me for this, you do fit in more easily. And I've never felt like I fit in easily. And some people don't know what that's like. It's really quite awful, to be honest. And I'd rather have it that than not believe in myself. But who knew, you know?
I don't know. I've said this before. I think it's probably easier on my end because you can just build belief. I think.
I don't know, because I've never
I know.
On the other end.
Well, obviously,
yeah, self-doubt must be very debilitating.
it's very challenging. It's very challenging. But I wonder. We won't dive into it.
Both are challenging. Both are challenging.
I wonder if there is an easier one to work through. I don't know. Again,
you got to be on one end, right? I mean, everyone's on one of those two ends.
I think so. And I think everything has its. We'll save it. We'll save it for tomorrow's episode because we're talking about fear, and I think we can intertwine some of the stuff we talked about today with what we talk about tomorrow and some of the stories we have. So we'll table it for now, and then 24 hours from today, you'll be able to hear us on a different episode talk about it. Next Level Nation, if you are looking for a group of like-minded humans that will allow you to feel safe in being yourself, if you're looking for a group where you can grow and evolve and you don't have to worry about failure and you don't have to worry about success because you're not going to be villainized or made fun of for either one on either end, we have a private Facebook group called Next Level Nation that is all about that. It's all about growth, all about evolving, all of that happy jazz. And if you are someone who is looking to chase your dreams more, to chase your dreams better, I'll use that word, Alan is a wonderful coach, whether you have a business or not. I think if you have a business, it'll help tremendously. But if you don't, he does relationship talks, coaching with Emilia, and many, many, many other things, which is why at times it's hard to talk about what he does because he does all sorts of different stuff. But can we put Alan's link for a call in the show notes? You have that, right? I'm assuming?
Yeah. It's a Calendly link for 30 minutes. First one is free.
Right on. All right. Tomorrow, for episode number 1697, we're creeping up on 1700. As I mentioned, we're going to tie a little bit of what we talked about today into tomorrow's episode. The monster in the closet isn't actually a monster. We have a couple of cool stories that will help that point land, hopefully. As always, we love you. We appreciate you. Grateful for each and every one of you. And at NLU, we don't have fans. We have family. We will talk to you all tomorrow.
Face those fears. Next Level Nation.